I rescued her from a car crash, but she fell for someone else. She still doesn't know I saved her. Imagine this. You're the hero in someone's life, the one who stepped in and saved them from a moment of danger. But they don't know it's you. They don't know what you risked or the lengths you went to. And instead of thanking you, they end up falling for someone else, someone who took credit for what you did. How would you feel? Well, that's exactly what happened to Alex. Alex stands at the front of a grand hall, surrounded by applause and admiration. Tonight, he's back at his old college, but not as a student. He's here as a celebrated guest, a young entrepreneur who's built a successful career and family business reputation. To everyone in the crowd, he's a symbol of success, a star alumnus. The room buzzes with pride as people around him cheer, but Alex feels strangely detached, as if he's just going through the motions. The people in the crowd are all faces from his past, including a few friends who once meant the world to him. One face stands out, Laura. She's watching him intently, her gaze full of anticipation. Laura, his old friend, who's admired him for years, sits in the front row, looking like she's waiting for something. And that's when it happens. As the ceremony reaches its peak, Laura suddenly stands up. Her eyes are locked on Alex, and her hands tremble slightly. She takes a deep breath and speaks, her voice carrying a mix of nerves and determination. Alex, she begins, her cheeks turning a light shade of pink. I've wanted to say this for a long time. I admire you, not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you are. I love you. The entire room falls silent. Heads turn. Everyone's eyes are on Alex and Laura. There's a quiet excitement in the air, as if they're watching a real-life romance unfold. The crowd is waiting, expecting Alex to smile, maybe to even say he feels the same. But instead, Alex's expression stays steady. He takes a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment. He knows what everyone wants him to say, the polite response, the one that would make the crowd cheer. But he can't do it. He meets Laura's gaze and in a calm voice says, Laura, I think you misunderstood. I care about you, but not in that way. The words hang in the air, heavy and final. Laura's face falls, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She stands there frozen, as if she can't quite believe what she just heard. Around them, the crowd stirs, murmurs breaking the silence. Everyone expects me to say yes, to embrace her, to give them the happy ending they want to see, Alex thinks, his mind racing as he watches Laura's reaction. But he knows something that no one else does, a memory only he carries, because Alex remembers a different life, a life where he did accept Laura's love, where he thought they could be happy together. But that choice, it led them both down a path of heartbreak and betrayal, all because of someone he once trusted. In that life, he and Laura were close. They had a connection that felt unbreakable, but little by little, that connection was worn down by the influence of his best friend, Dan. Dan was the friend he thought he could always rely on, someone who'd been by his side through thick and thin. In that other life, Alex and Laura were happy, at least at first. They shared dreams, laughter, and the hope of a future together. But then slowly, things began to change. There were arguments, misunderstandings that seemed to come out of nowhere, moments of jealousy and doubt that felt almost unnatural. And at the center of it all was Dan. Dan would always be there, always ready to listen, always ready to advise Alex. He'd make small comments, seemingly harmless things, that subtly planted doubt in Alex's mind. He'd say things like, "Are you sure Laura's being honest with you?" Or, "I saw her talking to someone else. I thought you two were exclusive." Looking back, Alex realizes how carefully Dan chose his words, always making it seem like he was just being the caring friend. In that past life, it took Alex a long time to see the truth, that Dan was only pushing them apart, for reasons Alex couldn't understand at the time. By the time Alex saw through Dan's manipulations, it was too late. His relationship with Laura had crumbled, and all the love they once shared was destroyed. Now, in this life, Alex is determined to take a different path. He knows the price of letting this relationship play out, and he won't make the same mistake again. Rejecting Laura now is painful, but he believes it's the only way to save them both from the heartbreak that lies ahead. He watches as Laura's face changes, her confidence slipping away as she realizes that he meant every word. The crowd shifts uncomfortably, some of them murmuring in surprise or disapproval. But Alex stays firm, knowing that this is the only way to protect both himself and Laura from repeating the mistakes of their past. The hall is filled with uneasy whispers as Laura quickly leaves the room, her head down, her hands shaking. Her friends try to comfort her, but she brushes them off, her face pale with humiliation. People stare, some even taking pictures, and the whispers grow louder as she disappears from view. Alex feels the weight of his choice settling on him. He knows that by rejecting her so publicly, he set off a wave of judgment and gossip that Laura will have to face alone. But he tells himself it's for the best, that a clean break is the only way to end the cycle of pain that defined their past life. But there's something else weighing on Alex's mind. As he glances across the hall, his eyes land on Dan, who's standing in the back, watching the scene with a strange expression. It's almost like satisfaction. And in that moment, Alex feels a familiar sense of unease, a suspicion he's tried to ignore. He can't shake the feeling that Dan's role in their story isn't as innocent as it seems. What if in this life too, Dan is waiting to drive a wedge between him and Laura? What if the same pattern is repeating itself? Flashback to the past life, a broken love story. As Alex watches Laura walk out the ceremony, humiliated and broken, his mind drifts back to another life, a life where things played out very differently, a life he's the only one who remembers. In that timeline, he accepted Laura's love. He remembers the excitement of those early days, the hope, the connection, the feeling that he found something real. They'd spend hours together, laughing, talking about their dreams, their fears, and their future. For a while, it felt like nothing could break them. But as time went on, cracks began to appear. Little arguments, misunderstandings, doubts. He remembers thinking that it was just normal couple stuff, just the ups and downs of any relationship. But looking back now, he sees it differently. And the person who seemed to be there at every turn, who always had advice, who always understood his frustrations, was Dan. In that past life, Dan had been his closest friend, his confidant. They were like brothers, or so Alex thought. Dan was the one who'd helped him get through tough times, the one who knew him better than anyone else. So when things got complicated with Laura, it felt natural to turn to Dan. Dan always had the right words. He'd listen carefully, nodding as if he genuinely cared, and then he'd say things like, "I'm just looking out for you, Alex. I want what's best for you." Dan would drop hints, little comments that seemed harmless at the time. He'd say things like, "Are you sure Laura's being completely honest with you?" Or, "I saw her talking to someone else the other day. Looked like they were getting close." At the time, Alex brushed it off as Dan just being a little overprotective, maybe even jealous. But now, he sees it differently. As the relationship went on, Alex started noticing things he hadn't paid attention to before. He'd catch Laura in casual conversations with friends, and Dan's words would echo in his mind. He'd find himself wondering, is she really as committed to me as she says? Or why did she seem so friendly with that guy? And every time he felt these doubts, Dan was there to support him. Dan would say things like, "Look, I'm just being honest. I know you love her, but you don't want to get hurt, right?" Those words stuck with Alex, feeding his insecurities. Slowly, the trust he'd once had in Laura began to erode. Eventually, those doubts led to arguments. Alex would question Laura about little things. Why she took so long to respond to his texts. Why she seemed distracted sometimes. Why she spent time with certain friends. Laura, confused and hurt, would try to reassure him, but the tension between them only grew. One day, it reached a breaking point. Alex confronted Laura, accusing her of being dishonest, of hiding things from him. She was shocked, unable to understand why he suddenly seemed so distrustful. She swore she'd never betrayed him, that she'd never given him a reason to doubt her. But Alex, under the influence of Dan's constant advice, couldn't let go of his suspicions. The more Laura tried to explain, the more he felt like she was just covering up. All the while, Dan was there, quietly watching things unfold. He'd listen to Alex's frustrations, offering him more support and advice. He'd say things like, Maybe she's just not ready for the kind of commitment you want. Maybe it's better if you end things before you get hurt. Looking back now, Alex sees how Dan played both sides, feeding his doubts while appearing supportive. Dan wanted Alex to think he was the only one he could truly rely on, and slowly Dan succeeded. He drove a wedge between Alex and Laura without ever making it obvious. After weeks of tension, Alex and Laura's relationship began to crumble. The arguments became more frequent, the misunderstandings harder to clear up. The warmth and closeness they once shared faded, replaced by suspicion and resentment. They both felt the pain of watching something beautiful fall apart, and yet neither of them knew how to fix it. Alex remembers the final argument vividly. They were sitting on the steps outside her dorm, the night air cool and still. Laura looked at him, her eyes full of hurt, and said, "I don't understand why you don't trust me, Alex. I've done everything I can to show you how much you mean to me." But Alex, his mind clouded by doubt and Dan's constant influence, couldn't see past his own insecurities. He ended things that night, convinced he was protecting himself from a heartbreak that, in truth, he was creating. In the days that followed, Alex felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. He ended things with Laura, thinking he freed himself from a potential betrayal. But instead, he felt like he lost a part of himself. He'd pushed away someone who truly cared for him, all because he let someone else's words cloud his judgment. It wasn't until much later, when he saw Laura moving on with her life, that he began to realize the weight of his mistake. He let his insecurities and Dan's manipulation destroy something precious. But by then it was too late. The damage was done. One day, Alex overheard Dan talking to a mutual friend. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Dan was boasting about how he'd saved Alex from a mistake. He laughed, saying things like, Alex would have been miserable with her anyway. She wasn't right for him. That was the moment everything clicked for Alex. He saw Dan for who he truly was, someone who wanted control, who wanted to be the most important person in Alex's life, even if it meant tearing down the people Alex cared about. The weight of that realization hit Alex hard. He let himself be manipulated, let his insecurities cloud his judgment, and in the end, he lost Laura because of it. The regret was overwhelming. He wanted to go back, to make things right, to show Laura that he did trust her, that he did love her. But by then, she moved on, and he was left to pick up the pieces. Now, as he stands in the present timeline, watching Laura walk out of the ceremony after his rejection, Alex feels a strange sense of déjà vu. He knows what lies ahead if he lets himself get too close to her. He knows the cycle of heartbreak that Dan will try to create if he gives in to his feelings. So this time, he's determined to break free. He's not going to let Dan control his life again. He's going to keep his distance, even if it means pushing Laura away for good, because he knows that some things are better left in the past. The car accident and the truth of the rescuer. Years ago, on a stormy night, Laura had been in a terrible car accident. It was the kind of night people would rather forget. Dark clouds covered the sky, rain poured heavily, and visibility on the road was low. Laura was driving home from a friend's house, feeling tired and distracted. She was just a teenager then, caught between worlds, her family, the Collins, and her own need to find a place where she truly belonged. Suddenly, a car in front of her braked, and in the split second she took to react, she lost control. Her car skidded off the road, hitting the side rail and flipping over. She remembers only flashes from that night, the sound of metal crunching, her body tossed around, and then nothing. Everything went dark. Laura was unconscious when she was pulled from the wreckage, but she remembers a single vague image, a bracelet glinting in the faint light, brushing against her as her rescuer lifted her out of the car. It was the last thing she saw before she blacked out completely. When she finally woke up in the hospital, she was surrounded by beeping machines and white walls, and she felt a strange sense of confusion. Her family stood around her, but it was Dan who was by her side, looking concerned. He told her he'd been the one to save her, that he found her by accident while driving home. Laura, groggy and disoriented, thanked him with all her heart. She was young and scared, and she clung to the idea that Dan had been her hero that night. From that moment on, she looked at him differently. She felt grateful, even connected to him in a way she didn't understand. It was that gratitude, that misplaced sense of admiration, that eventually grew into something more. But now, in this timeline, Alex knows the truth. He remembers that night vividly, even though Laura doesn't. He was the one driving on that same road, heading home when he saw the accident. He was the one who ran out in the pouring rain, forcing open her car door, lifting her out of the wreckage, and calling for help. He was the one who saved her life. Alex still wears that same bracelet, the one she saw in her hazy memory. He's never told her the truth because he didn't need her admiration or her thanks. At the time, he was simply relieved she was safe. But that night changed everything for him. Even though Laura never remembered his face or his name in connection to the accident, she always carried a vague feeling of being saved. Only in her mind, that gratitude was directed toward Dan, not Alex. From then on, Laura felt a deep admiration for Dan, an admiration she didn't even fully understand. She felt indebted to him, and as they grew older, that feeling evolved into something more. She believed that Dan was the one who truly cared for her when others didn't, and it became a central part of how she saw herself. But in reality, Dan had done nothing to save her that night. He only took credit, knowing that Laura would never remember the truth. And in doing so, he anchored her loyalty to him, binding her to him in a way she couldn't explain. Meanwhile, Alex, the real rescuer, quietly watched as Laura's admiration grew for someone who had lied to her. He watched as her gratitude transformed into something that ultimately pulled her closer to Dan and away from him. Now, as he watches Laura in the present timeline, he wonders if he should reveal the truth. Should he tell her that he was the one who saved her? Would it change anything, or would it only make things more complicated? Part of him wants her to know, to finally see him as he truly is. But another part of him wonders if it's worth it. After all, her feelings have already been tangled up in misunderstandings, both in this life and the one he remembers. She's already been pulled back and forth between him and Dan. Telling her the truth now might only add more confusion, more heartbreak. Dan, on the other hand, has built his entire connection with Laura on a lie. He knew she wouldn't remember that night clearly, so he took advantage of her vulnerable state. He stepped in as the hero, even though he never lifted a finger to help her. To Dan, Laura's admiration was something he could use, a way to keep her close, to bind her loyalty to him. Over the years, Dan would drop hints about that night, casually reminding her of how he found her, how he'd been in the right place at the right time. Laura, grateful and unaware, never questioned him. She saw him as a trusted friend, a person she could rely on, and Dan kept it that way, using her gratitude to keep her from getting too close to Alex. For now, Alex decides to keep the truth to himself. He doesn't want to disrupt Laura's sense of stability, not yet. He believes that eventually she'll come to see Dan for who he truly is. But he also knows that at some point she'll need to hear the truth from him. He's just not sure when. In Laura's mind, Dan has always been her savior, the one who was there for her in a moment of true need. That belief shapes so much of her trust in him. Even now, as she struggles with Alex's rejection, she finds herself leaning on Dan for support, feeling that he's always been the one she could rely on. But the cracks in that belief are starting to show. Deep down, she senses that something isn't right. She can't explain it, but she feels a strange pull toward Alex, a feeling she can't place. She wonders if she's missing something, if there's a part of her past that she's somehow forgotten. Alex knows that someday he'll have to tell her the truth, but he wants it to be at the right moment, when she's ready to hear it. For now, he'll keep his distance, hoping that Laura will start to see through Dan's facade on her own. But as he watches her lean on Dan, seeing the admiration in her eyes, he wonders if that day will ever come. How long will she continue to trust the wrong person? And when the truth finally comes out, will it be too late? As Alex reflects on everything he's seen and experienced, he feels a sense of purpose. He's determined not to let Dan manipulate things the way he did before. He may keep the truth from Laura for now, but he won't let Dan get in the way of her happiness anymore. The truth will come out, he thinks, but only when she's ready to hear it. For now, he'll stay in the background, watching, waiting, and hoping that Laura will start to see the real Dan, because when she finally does, Alex wants to be there, ready to tell her the truth, and ready to help her see who her true friends really are. Present day, campus reactions to the rejection. After Alex's rejection of Laura at the ceremony, word spreads fast. The college campus is buzzing with gossip, and it seems like everyone has an opinion. Friends, classmates, even people who barely know Laura and Alex are whispering, speculating about what really happened. The story of her public confession and Alex's cold response becomes the hot topic of every hallway, every lunch table, and every chat. People can't stop talking about how Laura, once a campus idol, was left heartbroken in front of everyone. There's a mix of reactions. Some feel sorry for her, others judge her, but nearly everyone has something to say. Laura can feel the weight of all those eyes on her. Everywhere she goes, she hears fragments of conversations, people debating her confession, mocking her courage, or sympathizing with her heartbreak. As she walks across campus, Laura tries to hold her head high, but inside, she feels shattered. She can't believe what happened, can't understand why Alex rejected her so harshly. It's a wound that runs deep, and the whispers around her only make it worse. It's as if everyone is judging her for something she thought was pure and honest. She starts to feel isolated, like she doesn't belong anywhere. Her friends are supportive, but even they don't understand the depth of her pain. And every time she hears someone mention her name or sees someone give her a pitying look, it feels like another cut. In the midst of all this, Dan makes his move. He approaches Laura, acting like a concerned friend, ready to offer his support. He tells her that he understands her pain, that he's there for her. He says all the right things, making her feel like he's the only one who truly cares. But Dan's motives aren't as pure as they seem. He's not just being a friend. He's using this opportunity to bring her closer to him, to solidify his role in her life as someone she can rely on. He's careful with his words, subtle in his approach, making sure she sees him as the stable, dependable person who's always there for her. Laura, still hurting from Alex's rejection, leans on Dan more than ever. She starts to believe that maybe he's the only one she can trust, the only one who genuinely cares about her well-being. Meanwhile, Alex watches all of this unfold from a distance. He sees how the campus has turned on Laura, how people are using her vulnerability as a source of entertainment. He can feel the sting of his decision, wondering if he should have handled things differently. But deep down, he knows he did what he thought was right. He needed to end things with her to protect both of them from the mistakes of their past. But watching Laura suffer alone, seeing her turn to Dan, fills him with a quiet regret. He knows Dan's true nature, knows that Dan is far from the friend he appears to be. But Alex has chosen to keep his distance, believing that intervening now would only make things worse. Laura tries to make sense of everything. She replays the moment of her confession over and over in her mind, questioning what she did wrong, wondering if she'd misinterpreted Alex's kindness all along. The doubt eats away at her, filling her with a sense of shame she can't shake. But Dan's presence becomes her lifeline. He's there, always saying the right things, always reassuring her. He tells her that she didn't do anything wrong, that Alex simply didn't see her value. He subtly shifts her perspective, making her feel like Alex's rejection was a failure on his part, not hers. Dan's words bring her a strange kind of comfort. She starts to believe that maybe Alex wasn't worth her love after all, that maybe she deserves someone who truly appreciates her. Dan continues to offer his support, and Laura feels grateful, not realizing how carefully he's playing into her emotions. Watching from the sidelines, Alex feels torn. Part of him wants to reach out, to tell Laura the real reason he turned her down, to explain that it wasn't because he didn't care. But he holds himself back, knowing that doing so would only complicate things. He doesn't want to drag her into the painful cycle he experienced in his past life. He tells himself that this is for the best, that she'll eventually move on and find happiness without him. But as he watches her lean on Dan, his regret grows. He wonders if, by staying silent, he's only pushing her further into the arms of someone who doesn't have her best interests at heart. Over time, Dan starts to reveal his true colors, though Laura doesn't see it. He becomes slightly more possessive, dropping hints that maybe she should distance herself from certain friends, that he's the only one who understands her. He subtly tries to control her, making her feel like he's the only one she can rely on. Laura, still reeling from her rejection, clings to his attention, grateful to have someone who seems to genuinely care. But Alex, watching from afar, notices the signs. He sees how Dan's influence over Laura is growing, and he can sense the same pattern he saw in his past life, the same manipulation, the same control. But once again, he decides to stay out of it, hoping that Laura will see the truth on her own. The more Laura spends time with Dan, the more she feels herself depending on him. She starts to see him as her safe place, the one person who didn't abandon her. She trusts him completely, believing that he's her only true friend in this difficult time. But somewhere deep down, she can't shake the feeling that something is missing. She misses Alex, misses the sense of security she felt with him, even if it was just an illusion. She wonders if she made a mistake, if there's something she didn't understand. But Dan is always there, ready to remind her that she deserves someone better, someone who won't hurt her the way Alex did. Alex realizes that his presence may only complicate things further, so he chooses to keep his distance, but he remains aware of everything happening. He sees Laura leaning on Dan, and though it pains him, he knows that the truth will reveal itself in time. He believes that Laura will eventually see through Dan's mask, that she'll recognize his true intentions. But he also knows that the journey to that realization will be painful, and there's nothing he can do to protect her from it. As Alex watches Laura and Dan together, he feels a mixture of regret and resolve. He wishes things could be different, that he could tell her the truth without causing more pain, but he knows that some lessons have to be learned the hard way. And for now, all he can do is wait, hoping that Laura will find her way to the truth on her own. Confrontation with Dan. Alex has been observing from a distance, watching as Dan's influence over Laura grows stronger. He's noticed subtle changes, the way Laura's world seems to revolve around Dan now, how she relies on him for everything, and how isolated she's become. It's all too familiar. It's the same pattern he saw in his past life, the one that led to heartbreak and betrayal. Alex knows he can't stay silent forever. He's been trying to keep his distance, hoping that Laura would see through Dan's manipulations on her own. But it's clear that Dan's control over her is only getting stronger. Alex realizes that if he doesn't step in, history may repeat itself, and this time, it might end even worse. One evening, Alex finds Dan alone on campus, leaning against the side of a building, casually scrolling through his phone. The moment feels right, and Alex seizes the opportunity. He approaches Dan, his face calm, but his eyes determined. Dan looks up, surprised to see Alex. He smirks, clearly unbothered. "Alex, what's up, man? Hadn't seen you in a while," Dan says, trying to play it cool. But Alex can see right through the act. Alex doesn't waste time with small talk. "I know what you're doing, Dan," he says, his voice steady. Dan's expression shifts slightly, but he quickly recovers. "What are you talking about?" he asks, feigning innocence. But Alex isn't here to play games. Alex takes a step closer, his gaze locked onto Dan's. "I know you've been feeding Laura lies, manipulating her feelings, making her think you're the only one she can trust. I don't know what your end game is, but I'm not letting you keep this up." Dan chuckles, shaking his head. "You're paranoid, Alex. Laura and I are just friends. I'm just looking out for her, especially after you broke her heart. She deserves someone who actually cares about her." Alex clenches his fists, but he stays calm. "I did what I did to protect her, but you're only hurting her more. You're filling her head with lies and isolating her from everyone else." Dan's smile fades slightly, and a flicker of anger crosses his face. "You had your chance, Alex, and you blew it. Laura came to me because you pushed her away. Don't blame me for taking care of her when you couldn't." There's a silence between them, and Alex feels a strange sense of clarity. He can see it in Dan's eyes, the possessiveness, the need to control. Dan isn't just taking care of Laura. He's using her vulnerability to keep her close. Alex speaks quietly but firmly. "You're not helping her, Dan. You're using her to satisfy your own need for control. You want her dependent on you so you can feel powerful." Dan scoffs, but there's a flash of anger in his eyes. "Maybe I'm the only one she can depend on," he snaps. "You don't understand, Alex. You don't know what it's like to always be in someone else's shadow, to always be the second choice. Dan's words hang in the air, and suddenly, everything clicks for Alex. This isn't just about Laura, it's about something much deeper. Dan has always felt like he was living in Alex's shadow, always the friend, never the one in the spotlight. And now he's found a way to gain control, even if it means manipulating someone as innocent as Laura. Alex steps back, shaking his head. This isn't about Laura at all, This is about you. You're using her to feed your own insecurities. Dan's expression darkens, and for the first time, he drops the act completely. His face twists with bitterness as he glares at Alex. You've always had everything handed to you. The success, the admiration, the family name. You don't know what it's like to always be in the background, watching you take everything I wanted. Alex realizes that Dan's actions stem from years of resentment, jealousy, and bitterness. Dan has spent his life watching Alex achieve success, gain respect, and win admiration without effort. And in his mind, Laura was just another piece of that picture, another person who chose Alex over him. Dan continues, his voice laced with anger. Laura deserves someone who actually sees her, someone who's willing to stay by her side. Not someone like you, who only pushes people away when things get complicated. Alex clenches his jaw, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Maybe Laura does deserve someone better, but that person isn't you, Dan. You've been lying to her, manipulating her feelings to keep her close. That's not love. It's control. Dan laughs bitterly. You don't understand it, Alex. You never have. Laura needs someone to protect her, someone who's willing to do whatever it takes to keep her safe. And sometimes that means bending the truth. Alex shakes his head, disappointed. You're not protecting her, Dan. You're trapping her. You're taking away her ability to make her own choices, to see things clearly. Dan shrugs, clearly unbothered. Maybe that's what she needs right now, someone who can make the hard choices for her. She's too vulnerable, too hurt. I'm just doing what's best for her. Alex takes a deep breath, his voice steady but firm. I'm warning you, Dan. Stop lying to her. Stop manipulating her. She deserves to know the truth, to make her own decisions. If you really cared about her, you'd let her see things for what they are. Dan's face hardens, and he looks at Alex with pure defiance. And what if I don't? What are you going to do about it? Alex realizes that confronting Dan isn't enough. Dan isn't going to change, and he's too deep in his own bitterness to let Laura go willingly. If Laura is going to see the truth, Alex knows he'll have to show it to her himself. He decides to gather evidence of Dan's manipulation, to find a way to expose Dan's lies without causing Laura more pain. He starts observing Dan's interactions with her more closely, watching for signs, looking for moments where Dan's true motives might slip through. Alex knows it's a risk, but he's willing to take it. He can't stand by and let Dan continue to control Laura's life. She deserves to know who her real friends are and who's been lying to her all along. Before Alex leaves, Dan gives him a chilling warning. If you try to get in my way, Alex, you'll regret it. Laura is mine to protect, and I won't let you mess that up. Alex looks him straight in the eye, unafraid. Laura isn't yours, Dan. She's her own person, and she deserves to know the truth. If you think you can keep her in the dark forever, you're wrong. Dan smirks, a dangerous glint in his eyes. We'll see about that. As Alex walks away, he feels a surge of determination. He knows what he has to do now. He's going to protect Laura not by controlling her or hiding the truth, but by helping her see things clearly. He's going to show her Dan's true nature, even if it means risking their friendship. He tells himself that he's doing this for her, to give her the freedom to make her own choices. He won't let Dan's lies trap her any longer. The truth has a way of coming out, no matter how hard people try to hide it. He thinks, his resolve growing stronger with every step. Alex realizes that this is only the beginning. Exposing Dan's lies will be a challenge, and he knows it could drive a wedge between him and Laura, at least in the short term. But he's willing to take that risk. He believes that the truth will set her free, and that one day she'll understand why he did what he did. Sometimes we have to fight for the people we care about, even if it means risking everything. He reflects as he walks away, ready to confront whatever comes next. Laura struggles in growing isolation. After Alex's rejection and the public fallout, Laura finds herself more isolated than ever. The campus that once felt like home now feels like a place full of strangers, judgment, and whispers. She can't walk down a hallway without feeling eyes on her, hearing the faint murmur of voices discussing her, judging her. It's as if everyone's forgotten who she really is, or maybe they never really knew. Her confession, her heartbreak, and Alex's cold response have overshadowed everything else. She was once admired, respected. Now she's just the girl who got rejected, and it hurts more than she expected. Laura thought she was brave for speaking her heart, but now she's not so sure. Each day on campus feels like a test, and she's starting to wonder if she can handle it. Late at night, when she's alone, the doubts creep in. She replays the moment of her confession over and over in her mind, wondering if she'd been foolish. Had she misunderstood Alex's kindness? Had she imagined the bond they shared? The more she thinks about it, the more she blames herself. She feels a deep sense of regret, as if she's exposed a part of herself that was meant to stay hidden. Maybe she wasn't supposed to open up like that. Maybe she was supposed to keep those feelings to herself. She starts to question her own judgment, her own worth. In her loneliness, Laura finds herself leaning on Dan more than ever. He's always there, ready to listen, offering her comforting words and reassurance. He tells her that she did nothing wrong, that she was brave to be honest about her feelings, that Alex simply wasn't worth it. Dan's words give her a strange kind of comfort. He tells her that she deserves better, that she deserves someone who would never reject her, someone who sees her for who she truly is. He's careful with his words, subtly suggesting that he's the one who's always been there for her. Laura clings to this support, unaware of the deeper motives behind it. To her, Dan is just a friend, a loyal friend who's there when no one else is. But to Dan, this is exactly where he wants her to be, dependent on him, seeing him as her only true friend. As the days go by, the emotional toll of everything begins to weigh heavily on Laura. She starts to withdraw from her other friends, feeling like they don't understand her, like they see her differently now. She spends more time alone or with Dan, avoiding social events, avoiding places where people might talk. She's becoming a shell of who she once was. The girl who was once confident, full of life, and admired is now haunted by self-doubt and loneliness. The whispers on campus continue, and each day she feels a little smaller, a little more isolated. One evening, Laura sits in her room, scrolling through old photos on her phone. She comes across pictures of happier times, moments with Alex, with friends, before everything changed. She remembers the days when she felt secure, when her friendships were strong, and she felt like she belonged. The memories bring a bittersweet smile to her face, but they also remind her of everything she's lost. She wonders if those moments were ever real, or if they were just illusions. Was Alex ever truly her friend, or was it all in her head? She feels a growing sense of loss, not just of Alex, but of herself. As she spirals deeper into loneliness, Dan's influence grows stronger. He starts making subtle suggestions, hinting that maybe she should distance herself from people who don't truly care about her. He makes her feel like he's the only one who understands her, the only one who sees her pain. Dan tells her that she doesn't need people who judge her or make her feel small. He frames his words as protective, as if he's looking out for her, but in reality, he's isolating her further. The more she listens to him, the more she believes him, and slowly, she begins to cut ties with others. Laura doesn't realize it, but Dan is gradually taking control of her life. He's positioning himself as her sole support, her one anchor in a sea of judgment and pain. Laura's dependence on Dan grows deeper by the day. She feels like he's the only one she can rely on, the only one who truly cares. She starts to see him as her safety net, someone who would never hurt her the way Alex did. But in the back of her mind, there's a tiny voice that wonders if this is really healthy. She feels trapped, but at the same time, she can't imagine life without Dan. It's as if he's become the center of her world, and without him, she'd be lost. Dan continues to fuel this dependence, subtly feeding her doubts and insecurities, making sure she sees him as her only true friend. And Laura, caught in her own pain, doesn't see the manipulation happening right before her eyes. Meanwhile, Alex watches Laura from a distance, seeing how she's changed. He notices how she's withdrawn, how she spends almost all of her time with Dan, how she no longer smiles the way she used to. It pains him to see her like this, but he tells himself that he has to let her find her own way. He's tempted to intervene, to tell her the truth about Dan, to offer her a way out, but he knows that if he does, she may not believe him. She's too far under Dan's influence, too caught up in her own heartbreak to see things clearly. As Laura spends more time with Dan, a tiny seed of doubt begins to grow in her mind. She notices small things, the way he sometimes talks down about her other friends, the way he subtly criticizes anyone who isn't loyal to her. There's something possessive in his tone, something that doesn't quite sit right with her. But she brushes it off, telling herself that he's only looking out for her, that he's just being a good friend. She doesn't want to believe that someone who's been there for her could have bad intentions. Yet the doubt lingers, small but persistent, like a whisper she can't ignore. One evening, as they sit together, Dan makes another comment about her former friends, suggesting that they were never really there for her. But this time something shifts in Laura. She feels a sudden clarity, a realization that maybe Dan's influence isn't as pure as she thought. She tells him, gently but firmly, that she needs some space, that she wants to reconnect with her other friends. Dan's face changes, his usual calm demeanor slipping for a moment, but he quickly recovers, nodding and saying he understands, though there's an edge to his voice. Laura doesn't fully understand why she feels this way, but for the first time in weeks, she feels a sense of independence, a sense that maybe she can stand on her own. As Laura walks back to her room, she feels a weight lifting from her shoulders. It's just a small step, a tiny push toward regaining her sense of self, but it's a start. She realizes that she needs to find her own path, to rediscover who she is without relying on someone else to define her. She's still hurting, still processing the heartbreak, but she feels a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe she can find her way through this on her own. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is learning to stand alone, she thinks as she takes her first steps toward freedom. Alex and Fiona's growing friendship. After everything that's happened, Alex finds himself gravitating toward Fiona, Laura's half-sister. She's someone he didn't expect to connect with, someone he once thought of as distant, even a bit aloof. But now Fiona has become a surprising source of support in his life. There's a calmness to her, a grounded perspective that he's come to appreciate. Fiona and Alex start spending more time together. She listens without judgment, giving him space to express his frustrations, his doubts, his regret over what happened with Laura. In a world that feels chaotic and unpredictable, Fiona's presence is steady, reassuring. He never realized how much he needed someone who could see things clearly, without being pulled into the emotions of it all. Over time, what began as casual conversation starts to feel like something more meaningful. Alex finds himself looking forward to their talks, their moments of shared silence, and the quiet comfort she brings. One day, as they're sitting in the campus courtyard, Fiona offers him some advice that sticks with him. She says, "You can't control how people see you, Alex. All you can control is how true you are to yourself." Her words hit him deeply, and he realizes she's right. Fiona doesn't sugarcoat things. She's honest, sometimes brutally so, but it's a type of honesty that makes Alex respect her even more. She doesn't try to paint things in a rosy light or give him false hope about Laura. Instead, she encourages him to focus on what he can change, to let go of what he can't. In Fiona, Alex finds a friend who accepts him as he is, flaws and all. It's a refreshing change, and for the first time in a while, he feels understood without feeling judged. Fiona starts to influence Alex in subtle ways. She encourages him to stop worrying so much about what others think, to focus on his own path instead of getting caught up in the past. Slowly, he begins to let go of the guilt and self-doubt that's been holding him back. With Fiona's support, Alex starts to rediscover parts of himself he'd forgotten. His confidence, his ambition, his sense of purpose. She reminds him of his strengths, his ability to make a difference, and she pushes him to think beyond the drama that's been consuming him. In a way, Fiona is helping him find himself again, helping him remember who he is without all the complications and heartbreak that have clouded his view. And in the process, their friendship grows stronger, becoming a bond that neither of them expected. As the weeks go by, Alex starts to notice something else. It's subtle, almost unspoken, but there's a warmth between them that feels different. He catches himself glancing at her a little longer, noticing the small things, the way she laughs, the way she tilts her head when she's listening, the way she seems to see right through him. Fiona notices it too. She feels a sense of closeness with Alex that she doesn't have with anyone else. But she's careful not to push too hard, not to rush into anything. She's content with the way things are, letting their connection grow naturally. For Alex, this new feeling is both exciting and a little confusing. He didn't expect to feel this way, especially not after everything that's happened with Laura, but there's something about Fiona that feels safe, something that makes him want to explore this connection to see where it could lead. But Fiona has her own doubts. She's aware of her own history, her complicated relationship with Laura, and the potential fallout if things become more than just friendship between her and Alex. Part of her wonders if it's worth the risk, if she's ready to open her heart to someone who's already so connected to her half-sister. She reminds herself to stay cautious, to keep her feelings in check. She's been hurt before, and the last thing she wants is to end up in another painful situation. Yet, despite her caution, she can't deny that her feelings for Alex are growing stronger. She's drawn to him in a way she can't fully explain, a way that feels genuine and real. For now, she decides to take things one day at a time, savoring the moments they share, even if she's unsure of where it will lead. Spending time with Fiona also makes Alex realize the importance of true friendship. She doesn't demand anything from him, doesn't expect him to be perfect, doesn't judge him for his mistakes. With her, he feels free to be himself, to admit his flaws, his insecurities, his regrets. In Fiona, Alex finds something he's been missing for a long time, a friendship that's built on understanding, respect, and honesty. It's a friendship that doesn't come with expectations or strings attached, a friendship that feels pure and genuine. He starts to see Fiona not just as Laura's half-sister, but as someone with her own unique qualities, her own strength, her own wisdom. And in the process, he feels his admiration for her growing, deepening into something that might be more than friendship. Laura, though still caught up in her own struggles, starts to notice the change between Alex and Fiona. She sees the way they talk, the way they look at each other, the ease in their connection. Part of her feels a pang of jealousy, a sense that she's losing something important. She wonders if she misjudged Fiona, if maybe her half-sister was always more supportive of Alex than she ever was of her. She starts to feel a mix of regret and resentment, questioning whether she pushed Alex away only for him to find comfort in someone else. But Laura keeps these feelings to herself, uncertain and confused. She doesn't want to admit that she's affected by this, that she cares, so she buries the jealousy, telling herself that it's none of her business, that she has no right to feel this way. One evening, as they walk through campus, Alex shares some of his lingering regrets about Laura. He tells Fiona how hard it's been to see Laura struggle, to feel like he caused her pain. Fiona listens quietly, letting him pour out his feelings, his guilt, his worries. Then, in her calm, steady way, she reassures him. Alex, you can't change the past, but you can choose how you move forward. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for someone is to let them find their own path. Her words bring him a sense of peace he hasn't felt in a long time. Fiona has a way of grounding him, of helping him see things clearly. And for the first time, Alex feels like he can let go of the past and look toward the future, whatever it might hold. As the night goes on, Alex realizes that his feelings for Fiona are no longer just admiration or friendship. There's something deeper, something that makes him want to be close to her, to be there for her in the same way she's been there for him. He doesn't know what the future holds, doesn't know if this will become something more, but he knows that with Fiona, he feels a sense of calm, a sense of belonging, and he's willing to take things one step at a time to see where this connection leads. For now, he's content to enjoy her presence, to appreciate the friendship they've built, and to let his feelings unfold naturally. He knows that whatever happens, he's grateful to have her in his life. As they part ways that evening, Fiona feels a flicker of hope. She knows there are challenges ahead, knows that her connection with Alex isn't without its complications. But she also knows that she's ready to open herself up to the possibility of something new, something meaningful. Sometimes, the best relationships start when we least expect them, she thinks as she walks away, feeling a warmth in her heart that she hasn't felt in a long time. As the days go by, Alex and Fiona's friendship continues to deepen, built on honesty, support, and understanding. They both feel a sense of anticipation, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of something more. For now, they're content to let things unfold naturally, to let their connection grow without rushing. And as they spend more time together, they realize that they've found something rare and precious, a friendship that could turn into something beautiful. Laura's final confrontation with Alex. Laura has been struggling. Her mind has been swirling with questions, regret, and a strange feeling that she's missing something. She spent weeks trying to make sense of Alex's rejection, her heart bruised and her mind full of doubt. Every time she replays that moment in her head, she feels the sting of embarrassment and confusion. But there's something else, something she can't quite put her finger on. She's been feeling a strange disconnect, a nagging sense that the full story hasn't been told. It's like there's a piece of the puzzle that's just out of reach, something that might explain why Alex rejected her so publicly. So, after a lot of reflection, Laura makes up her mind. She needs answers. She needs to confront Alex, to understand why he did what he did. She wants closure, yes, but more than that, she wants the truth. Laura finds Alex one afternoon sitting alone on a bench under a large oak tree on campus. He looks deep in thought, and for a moment she hesitates, wondering if she's ready to face whatever he has to say. But she takes a deep breath and approaches him, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Alex looks up as she approaches, surprised but calm. He nods in acknowledgement, almost as if he's been expecting this moment. Laura sits down next to him, the silence between them thick with tension. She gathers her courage and finally speaks. "Alex, I need to know why," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you reject me like that? Why did you push me away in front of everyone?" Alex takes a deep breath, knowing that this moment has been coming for a long time. He looks at Laura, his expression softening, and decides to be honest. She deserves that much, he thinks. She deserves to know the truth, even if it's painful. "Laura, I never meant to hurt you," he starts, his voice filled with regret. "But I had to make a choice. I had to keep some distance between us, because I didn't want us to fall into the same trap we did before." Laura looks at him, confused. "The same trap? Alex, what are you talking about?" He hesitates, then finally says, "I remember. Things that you don't. Things from a different life, a different time. We were together then, and it ended badly. It ended with misunderstandings, heartbreak, and betrayal." Laura stares at him, completely taken aback. "What do you mean, a different life? Alex, that doesn't make any sense. Are you saying we've done this before?" Alex nods, his gaze steady. "Yes, in a way we have. I know it sounds crazy, and I don't expect you to believe it. But I remember everything, Laura. I remember the pain, the mistakes, the things we both did that hurt each other. And I didn't want that to happen again. I thought that by keeping some distance, I could protect us both." Laura's mind races, struggling to process his words. Part of her wants to dismiss it as nonsense, but there's something in his tone, something in the way he looks at her, that makes her pause. She feels a strange tug in her heart, a faint recognition she can't explain. Seeing her confusion, Alex realizes it's time to tell her everything. He takes a deep breath and begins. "There's something else you don't know, something that happened long before that moment in the hall. The night of your car accident, I was the one who found you. I was the one who pulled you out of that wreck." Laura's eyes widen in shock, her heart skipping a beat. "What? But Dan told me he saved me. He was there when I woke up. He told me he'd pulled me from the car." Alex shakes his head, his expression somber. "He lied to you, Laura. I was the one who found you that night. I was driving home when I saw your car on the side of the road. I pulled you out. I called for help. But you were unconscious when they took you to the hospital. By the time you woke up, Dan had taken credit for it." Laura feels a wave of emotions, anger, disbelief, betrayal. She stares at Alex, searching his eyes for any sign that he might be lying, but all she sees is sincerity. It all starts to make sense. The way Dan had always been protective, the way he positioned himself as her hero. As the truth sinks in, Laura feels a mix of anger and sadness. She realizes that she's been living a lie, that the person she trusted most had deceived her for his own gain. All those years, she believed in Dan's story, admired him, even loved him in some way, thinking he'd saved her. She feels a deep sense of betrayal, a pain that cuts deeper than she expected. How could he do this to her? How could he lie about something so important, something that had shaped her feelings for him all these years? Alex watches as Laura's expression shifts, the pain and betrayal evident in her eyes. He feels a pang of guilt, knowing that he's part of the reason she's hurting. He reaches out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I thought that by keeping the truth from you, I was protecting you. But I see now that you deserve to know that I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning." Laura looks at him, her eyes filled with hurt, but also gratitude. She sees the sincerity in his expression, the regret in his eyes. She nods, her voice quiet. "Thank you for telling me, Alex. I needed to hear this. Even if it hurts, I needed to know." As they sit in silence, Laura begins to confront her own feelings, the tangled emotions that have been building up inside her for so long. She realizes that her admiration for Dan was based on a lie, that the connection she thought they shared was built on deception. But what does that mean for her feelings for Alex? She feels a strange pull toward him, a sense of connection that she can't explain. Despite everything that's happened, she finds herself wanting to trust him, to believe that maybe, just maybe, they can find a way forward. Laura takes a deep breath, feeling a sense of release as she lets go of the weight she's been carrying. She looks at Alex, a soft smile forming on her lips. Maybe we both need to let go of the past. Maybe it's time to stop holding on to things that hurt us. Alex nods, a smile appearing on his face as well. He feels a warmth in his heart, a sense of hope that he hasn't felt in a long time. "I think you're right, Laura. Maybe this is our chance to start fresh, to move forward without all the baggage." For the first time in a long time, they both feel a sense of peace, a sense of possibility. They don't know what the future holds, but they're both willing to find out, to see where this new path might lead. As they walk away from the bench, side by side, they both feel a sense of closure. They faced the truth, confronted their pain, and made the choice to move forward. It's not a perfect ending, but it's a new beginning, a chance to rediscover themselves and each other. Dan's exposure and Laura's newfound awareness. After her conversation with Alex, Laura feels a powerful mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, and, strangely, relief. Learning the truth about the accident, about who really saved her, has shaken her to her core. She trusted Dan, relied on him, and even admired him based on a lie he crafted so carefully. Now she can't help but feel disgusted. She realizes that her feelings for Dan were built on falsehoods, on a story that was never his to tell. But more than anything, she feels an urgent need to confront him, to hold him accountable for the years of manipulation, for taking advantage of her trust. She can't move forward until she faces him and demands an explanation. With newfound determination, Laura sets off to find Dan, her mind racing with questions and accusations. She needs him to know that his lies have finally caught up with him. Laura finds Dan alone in the campus library, seated at a quiet table with a pile of books around him. She approaches him, her face calm, but her eyes blazing with intensity. Dan looks up, surprised to see her. He gives her a smile, the same easy, familiar smile that once made her feel safe. But now, all she feels is anger. "Dan, we need to talk," Laura says, her voice steady but firm. There's a strength in her tone that surprises even her. She's done being manipulated, done being kept in the dark. Dan, sensing her seriousness, puts down his book. "What's going on, Laura?" he asks, trying to keep his voice light. But there's a flicker of worry in his eyes, a hint that he knows what's coming. Without wasting time, Laura gets straight to the point. "I know the truth about the accident, Dan," she says, her voice low but filled with anger. "I know it wasn't you who saved me that night. It was Alex. Dan's face changes instantly. His confident expression falters and a hint of panic appears in his eyes. He tries to play it off, letting out a nervous laugh. Laura, what are you talking about? I was there. You know that. I told you everything. Laura shakes her head, her gaze unwavering. Stop lying, Dan. Alex told me everything. He was the one who pulled me out of that car, who called for help. You weren't there. You just took credit for it. Dan's face pales and he looks down, unable to meet her eyes. He tries to find the right words, but Laura can see the guilt in his expression, the truth he can no longer deny. After a moment of silence, Dan finally speaks, his voice defensive. Laura, I did it because I cared about you. You were unconscious when you got to the hospital, and I was there waiting for you. I didn't think it would matter who saved you. I just wanted to be there for you. Laura feels a surge of anger at his words. You didn't think it would matter. Dan, you lied to me for years. You let me believe you were my hero, that you were the one who saved my life. How could you think that wouldn't matter? Dan stammers, trying to explain himself. I didn't want you to look at me as just a friend, Laura. I wanted to mean something to you. I wanted you to see me as someone important, someone you could rely on. Laura's voice is firm, filled with the anger she's been holding back for so long. You had my friendship, my trust, Dan. You didn't need to manipulate me to keep it. But now I don't even know who you are anymore. Dan's expression changes, his face hardening. So what? You're just going to believe Alex? You're going to trust him over me. I've been there for you through everything, Laura. I've been by your side when no one else was. Laura's eyes narrow. And now I know why. You were never there to support me. You were there to control me, to make sure I never saw anyone else the way I saw you. You wanted me to need you, to depend on you, even if it meant building our friendship on a lie. Dan is silent, his face filled with frustration and guilt. He knows there's nothing he can say to undo the damage. He's finally been exposed, and there's no way to take back the years of lies. Desperate, Dan tries one last tactic. Laura, you don't understand. Alex has always been the golden boy, the one everyone admires. I was always in his shadow, always second best. Do you know how that feels? I just wanted a chance to be seen, to be valued. Laura's expression softens for a moment, but she quickly steels herself. Dan, I understand that feeling, but that doesn't excuse what you did. You used me, manipulated me, all because you were jealous. You wanted to be someone important to me, but you didn't respect me enough to let that happen naturally. Dan looks down defeated. He knows she's right, but the realization only deepens his bitterness. Laura takes a deep breath, feeling a sense of release. She finally understands the truth, sees Dan for who he really is. And with that clarity comes a sense of freedom. She realizes that she doesn't need Dan, that she's strong enough to stand on her own. Goodbye, Dan, she says, her voice calm but firm. I'm done with the lies, with the manipulation. I deserve better than this, better than you. Dan watches in silence as she turns and walks away, her back straight, her head held high. He knows he's lost her, and for the first time, he feels the full weight of his actions. He thought he could control her, keep her close, but in the end, his lies have only driven her away. As Laura walks away from Dan, she feels a mixture of emotions, relief, sadness, anger, but most of all, a sense of strength she didn't know she had. She's finally free from the lies that have held her back, free to move forward without the weight of Dan's manipulation. For the first time in a long time, she feels in control of her own life, her own choices. She realizes that she doesn't need anyone else to define her worth, that she's enough on her own. Later that evening, Laura sits alone, reflecting on everything she's learned. She feels a sense of clarity, a deeper understanding of herself and her relationships. She realizes that her trust is valuable, that she deserves honesty, respect, and love that doesn't come with strings attached. She thinks about Alex, about the truth he shared with her, and feels a pang of gratitude. Despite the pain, he was willing to be honest with her, to give her the chance to see things clearly. She realizes that honesty, even when it's painful, is what builds real connections. Laura decides that from now on, she'll protect her heart, not by shutting people out, but by valuing the truth and standing up for herself. As Laura closes her eyes that night, she feels a sense of peace she hasn't felt in years. She knows there's still healing to be done, but she's ready to take that journey. She's ready to embrace her own path, to move forward without the weight of deception holding her back. Laura's confrontation with Dan has opened her eyes, not just to his deception, but to her own resilience. She knows now that she deserves relationships built on honesty, trust, and respect. She's finally free to rediscover herself, to build a future that isn't defined by someone else's lies. As she looks toward the future, Laura feels ready to face whatever comes next, knowing that she has the strength to stand on her own, to create a life filled with truth and authenticity. Alex and Fiona's engagement announcement. In the weeks following her confrontation with Dan, Laura feels a sense of peace she hasn't known in a long time. She's finding her own way, rediscovering her independence, and letting go of the pain and betrayal that once weighed her down. She even finds herself reflecting on Alex with a new sense of clarity and acceptance. But then something unexpected happens. Word spreads across campus that Alex and Fiona are officially a couple, and to everyone's surprise, they're planning to announce their engagement. It's a moment that catches Laura completely off guard. She feels a rush of emotions, surprise, curiosity, and a hint of sadness. Even though she's moved on, there's a part of her that feels something shift at the news. After everything they've been through, it feels strange to think of Alex with someone else, someone who's now becoming such a big part of his life. As she processes the news, Laura feels a mix of emotions she can't quite pin down. On one hand, she's genuinely happy for Alex. She knows Fiona has been a supportive friend to him, someone who's helped him find stability and peace in the middle of all the chaos. But on the other hand, there's a lingering sense of loss. It's not that she wishes things had gone differently between her and Alex. She knows they're better off as friends. But hearing about his engagement stirs up memories, a feeling that a chapter of her life is truly closing. Laura takes a deep breath, realizing that this moment is a final step in letting go of the past. Alex has moved forward, found love, and is building a future with someone who truly cares for him. And now it's her turn to do the same. As the engagement announcement becomes official, the entire campus is buzzing. People are excited, curious, and of course, full of questions. Alex and Fiona make their announcement with grace and sincerity, sharing their happiness with friends and family. Fiona stands by Alex's side, a quiet confidence in her eyes. She's never been one to seek the spotlight, but today, she feels proud to stand beside the man she loves. And Alex, for the first time in a long time, looks truly at peace. He's found someone who accepts him for who he is, someone who's helped him heal and let go of his past. Laura watches from a distance, feeling a mix of pride and gratitude. She remembers how far they've both come, the struggles, the misunderstandings, and the growth. In a way, she feels like they've all played a part in each other's journey, shaping each other into stronger, more resilient people. As the day goes on, Laura takes a moment to reflect on her own life, her own journey. She realizes that, just like Alex, she's ready for a new beginning. She no longer feels defined by the heartbreak, the rejection, or the lies. She's stronger now, more aware of who she is and what she wants. For the first time, Laura feels excited about her future, about the possibilities ahead. She knows she doesn't need an engagement or a relationship to feel complete. She's complete on her own. And with that realization comes a sense of freedom, a sense of peace that she's never felt before. After the public announcement, Alex and Fiona take a moment to themselves, away from the noise and excitement. They sit together in a quiet spot, holding hands, reflecting on how far they've come. Fiona looks at Alex, her eyes filled with warmth and gratitude. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" she asks, a soft smile on her face. Alex chuckles, shaking his head. "Honestly, no, but I'm glad we did. I never expected to find someone who understands me the way you do, someone who's been there for me through everything." Fiona squeezes his hand, feeling a sense of contentment she hasn't felt in years. They both face their own battles, their own struggles, but together, they found a way to build something real, something lasting. For Alex, being with Fiona feels like coming home. She's shown him that love doesn't have to be complicated, That true connection comes from understanding, trust, and a willingness to grow together. Watching Alex and Fiona together, Laura feels a surge of inspiration. She realizes that she's ready to take control of her own life, to build her own happiness, without relying on anyone else. She decides that from now on, she'll focus on herself, on her passions, on the things that make her feel alive. She's learned so much from her journey with Alex and Dan about trust, about self-worth, and about the power of resilience. And now she's ready to put those lessons into action to create a life filled with authenticity and purpose. Laura knows there will be challenges ahead, but she feels prepared, confident. She's no longer defined by her past, no longer held back by old wounds. She's free to live her life on her own terms. A few days after the engagement announcement, Laura and Alex run into each other on campus. They share a quiet smile, a mutual understanding passing between them. There's no awkwardness, no lingering tension, just a sense of peace and closure. "I'm happy for you, Alex," Laura says, her voice sincere. "You and Fiona, you deserve this. You both do." Alex smiles, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you, Laura. That means a lot. I'm glad we're both in a place where we can move forward, where we can finally be at peace." They share a quiet hug, a final moment of friendship and respect. They both know that their journeys have intertwined in ways they never expected, but now they're each ready to follow their own paths. As she walks away, Laura feels a weight lift from her shoulders. She knows that her story with Alex has come to an end, but it's a beautiful ending, one that allows her to fully embrace her own future. She feels stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life has in store. Laura decides to focus on her own dreams, her own goals. She's no longer tied to anyone's expectations, no longer living in the shadows of someone else's life. She's free to create a future that's entirely her own, one that's filled with purpose, passion, and independence. For the first time, she feels whole, complete. She doesn't need validation from anyone else. She's enough just as she is. Meanwhile, Alex and Fiona are busy planning their future. They've found in each other a partner who accepts them fully, who supports their dreams, who challenges them to be their best selves. Together, they're excited to build a life of love, respect, and mutual support. They know that relationships aren't always easy, that there will be ups and downs, but they're ready to face it all together. They've learned that love is about more than just romance. It's about friendship, understanding, and a willingness to grow side by side. As the days pass, Laura, Alex, and Fiona each settle into their new lives, filled with hope, purpose, and a sense of peace. They've all learned valuable lessons about love, trust, and self-worth, lessons that will guide them as they move forward. They know that life will bring challenges, but they're ready to face them, stronger and wiser than before. They've let go of the past, embraced the present, and are looking toward the future with open hearts. Final section, moving on. A new chapter begins. In the weeks following Alex and Fiona's engagement announcement, Laura finds herself in a place of newfound strength. She has faced her past, confronted the lies, and come out on the other side with a clear sense of who she is and what she wants. Laura begins to pour her energy into things she's passionate about, her studies, her creative projects, and reconnecting with friends. She realizes that she no longer needs someone else to complete her or define her worth. She feels whole on her own, strong in a way she hasn't felt in years. Her days are filled with purpose, and she finds herself looking forward to each one. She smiles more, laughs freely, and feels lighter, as if a weight she's been carrying for years has finally lifted. She knows her journey isn't over. There will be challenges ahead, but she's ready for them. As Alice and Fiona continue to plan their future, their relationship deepens. They're excited about the journey they're about to embark on, knowing they have each other's support and understanding. For Alex, Fiona has become not just a partner, but a best friend, someone who accepts him as he is and encourages him to be his best. Fiona feels the same way. She's found in Alex someone who respects her, who values her opinions, and who is committed to building a life together based on honesty and mutual growth. They talk about their dreams, their future home, and the adventures they want to share. It's a love that feels grounded, real, and deeply fulfilling. Together, They feel ready to take on the world, knowing they have each other's backs. One sunny afternoon, Laura decides to meet Alex and Fiona for coffee. She wants to wish them well and to truly close this chapter on a positive note. They sit together, reminiscing about old times, sharing laughs, and acknowledging how far they've all come. As they talk, there's no trace of awkwardness or regret, only mutual respect and understanding. Laura looks at Fiona and sees a woman who genuinely cares for Alex, who brings out the best in him. She feels a sense of peace, knowing that Alex has found happiness and that she's moving forward with her own sense of purpose. Before they part, Laura smiles and says, "I'm really happy for you both. You deserve this happiness, and I wish you nothing but the best." Alex reaches out, giving her a warm hug. "Thank you, Laura. That means a lot. I'm glad we're all in a place where we can look forward." Fiona nods, a gentle smile on her face. "We're all exactly where we need to be." They say their goodbyes, and as Laura walks away, she feels lighter, knowing that she's truly left the past behind. As the days go by, Laura starts to explore new possibilities in her life. She joins a writing club, starts volunteering, and even takes up painting. Things she's always wanted to do, but never felt brave enough to pursue. She finds joy in discovering new passions and meeting people who inspire her. Laura realizes that she's no longer waiting for someone else to give her life meaning. She's creating her own path, filled with purpose and joy. She's no longer defined by her relationships or by the opinions of others. She's free to be her own person. She feels alive, filled with a sense of wonder and excitement for what lies ahead. Every day feels like an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to become the person she was always meant to be. Months pass, and Alex and Fiona's wedding day finally arrives. It's a beautiful, intimate ceremony, filled with close friends and family. Laura attends with a genuine smile, happy to celebrate their union and grateful for the journey that has led them all here. As Alex and Fiona exchange vows, Laura feels a deep sense of pride for them. She knows how much they've both overcome, the struggles they've faced, and the strength they've found in each other. Their love is real, grounded in honesty and friendship, and it's a reminder to everyone there of what true partnership looks like. Watching them, Laura feels her own heart swell with hope for the future. She knows her time will come, but until then, she's content with her own journey, her own growth, and the life she's building for herself. As the ceremony ends, she raises a glass to Alex and Fiona, wishing them all the happiness in the world. Later that evening, Laura finds herself alone, reflecting on everything she's been through. She realizes how much she's changed, how far she's come from the girl who once based her worth on the opinions of others. She's become someone who values herself, who sees her own strength, and who trusts in her ability to create a beautiful life on her own. She thinks about the love she once felt for Alex, the friendship she had with Dan, and the painful truths she's had to face. She knows now that every part of her journey, the good, the bad, and the painful, has shaped her into who she is today. For Laura, this isn't the end. It's a new beginning. She's ready to continue exploring, learning, and loving herself more with each passing day. As Laura walks away from the wedding, she feels a deep sense of peace. She's let go of the past, of the heartbreak, and of the people who no longer have a place in her life. She's grateful for the lessons, the strength, and the clarity she's gained. She's ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold, with an open heart and a courageous spirit. She knows there will be new challenges, new adventures, and new opportunities to grow, and she's ready for all of it. With a smile, she looks up at the sky, feeling a sense of joy and freedom. She's finally found her way, and there's no going back. As the story closes, each character has found their own path, their own happiness. Alex and Fiona are building a future together, grounded in love and respect. Laura is embracing her independence, living a life filled with purpose, creativity, and self-love. They've all learned that life's greatest lessons come from the hardships we face and the courage we find to keep moving forward.